All right, so let's continue looking at factoring problems. The only extra layer that we really haven't gone a lot over is if you have to factor something out first before you do your two parentheses. So can't stress this enough. If you have anything that you're trying to factor, like in example 4, and all of the terms have something in common, you need to factor out the common monomial first, or the common number out, whatever they have in common. So if we were looking at this problem right here, the first thing before you even tried anything is saying, all right, 3x squared and 300, those two terms can be divided by 3, right? Because they both have a common factor of 3. So really what I'm going to do in this first stage is just divide everything by 3, and I'm going to pull that out. So this is going to become 1x squared minus 100. But that 3 needs to stay in the problem because I'm going to now put this in parentheses, and the 3 is going to go outside. Okay? And once we pull this 3 out, now we can look at this problem and continue factoring. So now we're going to look at this x squared minus 100, which can be factored as well, right? So if I wrote this x squared minus 100, it does not have a middle term. It doesn't have an x term. So I'm going to think about that as a 0x. And I know that I can take this green part, and I'm going to go ahead and try to make it into two parentheses here. Now, this is going to, if I factor this, I know it's going to be x times x is x squared here, and plus 10 and minus 10 is going to be the correct factoring here, because 10 times negative 10 is negative 100, and 10 plus negative 10 is 0 here. So this would be the correct factoring, right? You could easily go ahead and do the snowflake as well, right? Snowflake would be easy here, because we would say 1 and 1, this is negative 100, and this is 0. So we'd be thinking about what multiplies up to negative 100, right? 10 and negative 10. And that multiplies up to the top, and this adds up to the bottom. So this would be the complete factoring for example 4, but making sure that we factor out, do that first step first. All right, let's try another one. So go ahead and let's try this one. Factor negative 7t squared minus 63t. So here's one where we're again going to think about, all right, before I start trying anything, what can I divide everything by? Is there a common factor? And the answer is yes, there's a 7, and there's also a t. They both have a t, so I can divide out a 7t from both of these things. And beyond that, we can factor out a 7t. We could also factor out a negative 7t. Now that's kind of preference here, but if I factor out a negative 7t, so let's say I divide everything by negative 7t. I divide both terms by that. The nice thing about that is that this first term will then become a positive term, and it's kind of nice just to have that first term be positive. It's not absolutely necessary, but it's kind of nice. So both of these can be divided by 7t or negative 7t, and now if I rewrote this, this would become, all right, so negative 7 over negative 7 is 1, t squared divided by t, right? That's just going to become a t. My exponent properties there. T squared divided by t to the first is just t. And then negative 63t over negative 7t would become a 9, just a 9. So this would actually become t plus 9 here. But I would still have to take the term that I factored out and put it before the parentheses, which would be negative 7t. And this would actually be done at this point. We didn't have to do the two parenthesis method or anything like that, because now when I look at t plus 9, that can't be factored anymore. That's not t squared plus something. It's just a linear, t plus 9. So you can't go any further on this problem. And so once we factored out that little term there, it just so happened that we were done. So that's it. All right, so go ahead and try this one. Pause it. So, again, when you look at this problem, you could actually start off and do snowflake here, and you could get an answer, and you could salvage it by reducing at the end. But again, it's going to save you a lot of trouble here if you just factor out a common factor before you start anything. And I'm noticing here that everything could be divided by 5. And since I want to make, so I'm going to divide everything by 5. And since I would like to have this first term be positive, I'm going to divide everything by -5, just for convenience sake. So I'm going to factor out a -5. I'm going to put that off to the left here, and I'm going to write what I get left over. So if I divide everything by -5, this would become a 5y squared. This would become, get minus 12y, and then this would be plus 7. So we take out a -5, and that's the first major step. And then we can deal with what this, how to factor 5y squared minus 12y plus 7. And so now we'll go ahead and do that. I'm going to try to break that black part up into 2 parentheses. I'm going to keep my -5 and keep the -5 off to the left. And I'm going to try to take this portion right here and do snowflake and see if that factors. So I'm going to go ahead and put, this is a 5 and a 5. This is 35 and this is -12. I want to think about adding up to -12 and multiplying to 35. So 7 times 5, right? 7 times 5 is 35. Since we need to add to -35, this is going to be -7 and -5 here. And this works. That means that this is going to factor, and we are going to go ahead and reduce our columns here. This is already reduced right here, but this one can be reduced to 1 over -1. So those are my factorings. I'm going to have 5y minus 7 from this one, and then I'm going to have 1y minus 1 from this one. So there's my final answer.